Question 25. We have a company that has a product that can be sold for $600 per unit. So the selling price is $600 per unit. The variable manufacturing costs are $220 per unit, and the variable selling cost is $20 per unit. That's interesting. Okay, so the total fixed costs are $28,800 per period, and the production capacity is 400 units. We're asked to compute the break-even point in units as a percent of capacity and in dollars. So there's going to be three answers here. And we're also asked the question, if the variable manufacturing cost becomes $200, by what amount must the fixed cost go up in order to maintain the same break-even point in units? We'll get to that later. So first of all, let's see what we've got here. We've got sales minus our total costs is equal to our contribution margin or our markup, and minus our fixed costs will give us our net income, NI for net income. So let's see what we can fill in. All I know here is that my selling price per unit is $600 per unit, so I'm going to multiply that by the number of units. $600 per unit times the number of units. So N is the number of units. My costs, well, let's see, I haven't figured out my costs yet. My costs, or my total variable costs, are equal to $200 per unit. Sorry, that's not $200 per unit, it is $220 per unit. Our total variable costs are $220 per unit plus $20 per unit. So my total variable costs are equal to $240 per unit. So therefore, my total costs are going to be $240 times N, the number of units. And when I subtract that from $600 per unit, that leaves me with a contribution margin of $360 per unit times the number of units. So that's great. I now know that my contribution margin is 360 times N. My fixed costs are $28,800, so I'm going to put that right here, $28,800. And what I want to do first, again, it's not volume related, so I'm not going to put it underneath my N column. I want to figure out my break-even point. And at break-even, I know that my net income is $0, and so therefore, working backwards, what that means is that my contribution margin must be equal to my fixed costs, and so therefore, this contribution line has to be equal to $28,800. That's the only way that my net income will be 0, and I will break even. So now I have an equation, and I can solve that equation for N, the number of units to break even. So we've got 360 times N is equal to 28,800, and so N is equal to $28,800 divided by $360 per unit, the contribution margin. That leaves you with an N value equal to 80 units. And 80 units is the break-even volume in terms of number of units. The break-even sales level will be equal to 80 units times $600 per unit, and that works out to be a total of 6 times 8 is $48,000. So our break-even sales dollars is $48,000, and as a percentage of your capacity, as a percentage of the capacity of 400 units, our break-even point is 80 units. As a percentage of the 400 units capacity, that is a value of 20% of our capacity. And now let's take a moment to work out the second question, which is if the variable manufacturing cost becomes $20, what is the amount that fixed costs can go up in order to maintain the same break-even point? So in order to answer the next question, what we'll do is we'll move to a new page. Our total variable costs are going to be equal to $200 per unit plus the same $20 per unit that we had before from our variable selling costs. So our total variable cost is going to be equal to, it's going to be reduced from $240 to $220 per unit. And our selling price is still going to be the same. It's still going to be $600 per unit. So let's set up our chart again. So we've got total sales minus cost is our contribution margin minus our fixed cost is our net income. And what we want is to fill in some amounts here. Let's just say it's a sales line is going to be $600 per unit times the number of units. Our total variable costs are $220 per unit, so I'm going to deduct $220 per unit times the number of units, and that's going to leave me with 600 minus 220. That's going to be $380 per unit as our contribution margin. And I don't know what my fixed cost is. I don't know what that number is here. So I'm going to say that in order to break even, of course, I need to indicate that my net profit or my net income is equal to 0. Now the other point was that we want to make the same break-even point in terms of number of units. So therefore my break-even is at 80 units. And that's great because at 80 units now, I now know that N is equal to 80 units, and now I can plug those numbers in. So I've got contribution margin that must be equal to $380 per unit times 80 units. And that works out to be a value of $30,400. And so therefore, I can now say that my fixed costs can go up as high as $30,400 before I start to show a profit. So in other words, my fixed costs can go from our previous fixed costs, which were $28,800 per period, to, or up as high as, $30,400. Now what's the difference between those two? The difference between those two is $1,600. Our fixed cost can go up by $1,600 without affecting our break-even point.